Gaetz is by any standard completely unqualified to be the Attorney General, and yet we're sort of focused on this, cherry on the cupcake of the ethics report.
Congress has to advise and consent, and Matt Gaetz is going to go through the same scrutiny as every other individual.
The United States strongly supports Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Everyone around this table, in my view, should as well.
Hello, I'm Weijia Jiang in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. President-elect Donald Trump's pick for Attorney General is facing new pressure this week from his accusers and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. Matt Gaetz is at the center of several allegations involving drugs, bribes, and sex. Gaetz resigned last week ahead of the expected release of a House Ethics Committee report. Sources tell CBS News the committee is expected to meet on Wednesday, while lawmakers remain divided over its release.
We don't want to set a precedent where we, under any circumstances, will release documents from that committee.
I believe the Senate should have access to that. Now, should it be released to the public or not? That's I guess that will be part of the negotiations.
And the lawyer for two witnesses who testified before the House Ethics Committee is sharing his client's support for those details to be revealed. Major Garrett sat down with that lawyer earlier today for the CBS Evening News and joins me right now. Major, what did he have to tell you about those allegations?
The lawyer's name is Joel Leopard, and he represents two of, he told us, was 11 witnesses who have testified before the House Ethics Committee. And he said that the two clients that he represented attended many parties, 10 to 15, in which Matt Gaetz was present, and their presence there, that is to say his two clients, was with the understanding that they would be paid to have sex with guests at these various parties. Among those, Matt Gaetz. Here's also part of what he told us.
She arrived at the party. She had sex with Representative Gaetz within minutes of her arrival. Later on, when she was walking out to the pool area, she observed to her right Representative Gaetz having sex with her friend, who was 17 at the time.
And on this question, she's absolutely sure.
She's absolutely certain that she observed, seeing her friend and Representative Gaetz having sex against what she described as a game table of some sort.
If the House Ethics Committee report were to be made public, what do you think it would reveal?
My clients want to know that this happened and it's real. They didn't vote in the last two elections. They don't care one way or another, but they do want the public to know that they're not lying. They did not come forward willingly. They've never spoken to anyone without the force of a legal subpoena. The testimonies of her and the other 11 individuals that testified would show that this actually did happen, and the American people would know, and they could decide if that's the person they want to be the next Attorney General of the United States.
Joel Leopard also told us that there are lots of text messages in the possession of the House Ethics Committee between Matt Gaetz and his two clients and others, and that the Ethics Committee is in possession of Venmo and PayPal receipts showing that Matt Gaetz and others working in his behalf paid for sex at these parties. Also, there is coded language, Joel Leopard, the lawyer of these two witnesses, told us, that Gaetz used in text messages referring to illegal drugs that would be at these parties, and Matt Gaetz's ongoing curiosity to make sure that those illegal drugs, he would use code names, would be there at these various parties. So quite a bit of ground covered with this attorney representing two of, he told us, 11 witnesses that have appeared before the Ethics Committee.
And so, Major, presumably a lot more of those kinds of details would be spelled out in this report that as of now will not be released. House Speaker Mike Johnson had this to say about why on CNN over the weekend.
What I have said with regard to the report is that it should not come out. And why? Because Matt Gaetz resigned from Congress. He is no longer a member. There's a very important protocol and tradition and rule that we maintain that the House Ethics Committee's jurisdiction does not extend to non-members of Congress. I think that would be a Pandora's box.
Does Joel Leopard coming forward to put pressure on the House Ethics Committee to release the report do anything?
Well, he certainly hopes it will frame part of the conversation about what the public should or shouldn't know as the Senate decides whether or not to confirm Matt Gaetz as Attorney General. He doesn't believe that it's necessarily going to be the one thing that's going to influence the Ethics Committee decisively, but he said on behalf of his clients, he hopes the report is released because based on his experience working with these two clients, being with them as they testified before the Ethics Committee and seeing the granularity, the detailed level of the committee's questions and the evidence that they had, that is to say the Ethics Committee, he believes it would be a comprehensive report that would shed a considerable amount of light on questions raised about Matt Gaetz' fitness for Attorney General, both ethical questions and legal questions.
Well, Major, we might have some answers when that House panel meets on Wednesday. Thank you so much for all that reporting. We should also point out that the Department of Justice investigated Matt Gaetz on these accusations and ultimately decided not to charge him. Now, Gaetz isn't the only cabinet member embroiled in controversy. President-elect Trump is standing by Pete Hegseth, his selection for Secretary of Defense. The former Fox News host lawyer says Hegseth paid a confidential financial settlement to a woman who accused him of sexual assault to save his job at the news channel. The attorney maintains his client is innocent and that the sexual encounter was consensual. The Army veteran has denied any wrongdoing. Olivia Rinaldi joins us now from West Palm Beach, Florida. Olivia, it's great to see you. Are there concerns on Trump's team right now that, Hegseth's chances of getting confirmed could be jeopardized in the wake of this revelation?
Yeah, it's good to be with you, Weege, after we're learning all this new details and revelations about this alleged incident that happened in 2017. But I do want to point out, by all indications, the Trump team says they are sticking by Hegseth as the pick for, Trump's pick rather, for Secretary of Defense. And they still are expressing some confidence that he will be confirmed. Over the weekend, when we learned about this payment connected to a non-disclosure agreement that was signed in 2020 to keep this under locks, we reached out to the campaign to see, one, if they knew about this, and two, if this would impact any decision. Stephen Chung, who's now going to serve as White House communications director, he was communications director on the campaign, told us that Trump is committed to tapping highly qualified people, their quote, to serve in these roles, and that they look forward to him being confirmed. So by all indications, they're sticking by him, and they're still putting their weight behind Hegseth as their pick for Secretary of Defense.
And Olivia, I want to ask you about the pick for Treasury Secretary, which is obviously a huge job, especially in the eyes of President-elect Trump. Elon Musk came out in favor of businessman Howard Lutnick for that role. Can you tell us about what's happening behind the scenes as he waits to name somebody?
Yeah, and certainly a lot of jockeying for that role. It's part of what's considered the Big Four: Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Attorney General, and Secretary of the Treasury. It's the top economic advisor to the president. So Trump is taking some time in making this pick. But as you mentioned, that jockeying and Elon Musk wading into that as well. Howard Lutnick, who's serving as Trump's co-chair on the transition, is said to be lobbying for that role, and he got Musk's endorsement for it over the weekend. Musk saying that he would prefer Lutnick over Scott Bessent. He's a hedge fund manager, who works for Key Square Capital Group, who was seen as a top contender. But after Musk said that he's looking for someone who's not status quo to shake up Washington, it seems like this field is expanding of people Trump is looking at. We've also heard several names like Mark Rowan. He is the head of Apollo Group Management. Other people as well on Wall Street, other billionaires being mentioned. So it seems like Trump is taking his time making this pick. We learned a lot in the first 2 weeks, but as we head into the third week since the election, Trump taking a little bit of moment to make this pick, Weisha.
Well, he could announce it at any moment. We know that. Thank you so much, Olivia Rinaldi. Ahead, Democratic Congressman Brendan Boyle is here to discuss yet another looming government shutdown deadline and much more. The Kremlin says President Biden's decision to let Ukraine fire missiles deep into Russia could lead to a world war. Biden's approval of the weapons deployment marks a large shift in policy as the conflict in the region nears its 1,000th day. CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie Daga has the latest.
Well, for months, the Ukrainian government has been pleading with the White House for permission to use those long-range American weapons on targets inside Russia, and U.S. officials tell CBS News now with just 2 months left in office, the Biden administration finally gave it the green light. It's expected, we're told, that those weapons will be used in the Kursk region of Russia, where at least 10,000 North Korean forces have joined around 40,000 Russian troops. They're massing for this counteroffensive to wrestle back that territory from the Ukrainian military. The decision follows a weekend of heavy bombardment from Russian missiles and drones targeting Ukraine's electricity and infrastructure just in time for the winter. The Ukrainians have already had these Army tactical missile systems, or ATACMs, in the country for months, but only for use on Ukrainian battlefields. The White House had been reluctant to grant permission to strike Russia over concerns it would be seen as an escalation and a provocation to Russian President Vladimir Putin. That strike targets inside Russia. He specifically warned against the use of those American weapons. What do they bring to the fight? Well, the ATACMs have a top range of around 190 miles. There are versions that fly shorter distances and carry cluster munitions, and some of those have been used inside Ukraine. But their range, top range, makes them an effective standoff weapon. So they're able to penetrate deep behind enemy lines. That can cut off, disrupt supply routes, weapon stockpiles, logistics. Which again is why we get the sense they're probably going to be deployed in the Kursk region, not selecting targets inside Russia, far away from the battlefields and the combat zones. The Kremlin has responded with fury. Putin's spokesman saying the move adds fuel to the fire and that it is an escalation that would raise tensions across the region. Some lawmakers went even further, one senator calling it a step toward World War III. Ouija?
Charlie Daga, thank you. While we're just about 2 months away from President-elect Trump's inauguration, there is a different key date 1 month before that. Federal agencies are currently set to run out of money on December 20th, meaning that current members of the House and Senate are gearing up for what could be a complex funding fight this holiday season. Democratic Congressman Brendan Boyle is on Capitol Hill. He represents Pennsylvania's 2nd Congressional District and is a ranking member of the House Budget Committee. Congressman Boyle, great to see you. It is that time of year again, and here we are talking about the budget. Last week, House Speaker Mike Johnson said that President-elect Trump's preference for how to keep the government funded will, quote, carry a lot of weight. Is that true?
Well, Mike Johnson would certainly know that better than I would in terms of how his Republican colleagues would react to what Donald Trump wants. I would point out we are currently in the new fiscal year. We have a president, it's Joe Biden. We have a Democratic majority in the Senate. And we have a Democratic minority in the House, but one that time and time again has actually been counted upon to provide the bulk of votes for any previous government funding in the previous 3 years. So the reality is we don't live in an autocracy. We live in a system of checks and balances. Congress is the first article of the Constitution, and Democrats will have at least an equal say when it comes to the funding of this fiscal year. I believe, however, we need to avoid a government shutdown. I think that sort of chaos and dysfunction, the likes of which we have seen previously when Donald Trump was president, really doesn't serve anyone any good, and in the end costs American taxpayers more money than if we avoided a government shutdown in the first place.
And are you expecting there will be another stopgap measure to avert a shutdown, or do you think that you'll be able to pass something more substantive, something more long-lasting?
Well, the fiscal year that I spoke about that we're currently in, the new one, actually began on October 1st. We have already had a couple stopgap measures. I think that it's time, and I think that we do have enough time between now and December 20th, that we finally resolve this matter once and for all. The math won't change if we just kick the can down the road for another 30 or 60 days. So that would certainly be my preference. I know there are members on both sides of the aisle who currently are working in good faith in order to deliver that sort of an agreement. And that's what I'm going to be pushing for between now and December 20th.
And Congressman, you're also a member of the bipartisan Congressional Ukraine Caucus. I wonder what your reaction is to President Biden deciding to allow Ukraine to use those U.S.-provided long-range weapons now. Is it too little too late, or do you think it could really make a difference?
It certainly could make a difference. I will tell you that I've been part of a bipartisan group of members of Congress who have been pushing the administration to allow Ukraine to use the ATACMS in a way that would be most effective in terms of protecting their freedom and their sovereignty. In addition to serving in the Bipartisan Friends Ukraine Caucus, as you mentioned, I also serve as part of the U.S. delegation to the NATO Parliament. I'll be at our upcoming NATO Parliament meeting just this weekend. This is one of the most significant moments for NATO in its 75-year history. We cannot allow Russian aggression on European soil to stand, period.
And Congressman, I want to ask you about your home state. I spent a lot of time there during the campaign, and it's almost as if you knew what was coming, because years ago you started the so-called Blue Collar Caucus, and it seems that you anticipated this sort of reckoning with Democrats perhaps not understanding enough what people in your state are yearning for. So what do Democrats need to do to win back working class voters in particular?
Yeah, well, thank you. My colleague, Mark Vesey of Texas, and I founded it exactly 8 years ago because we were already starting to see slippage among working class Americans. Both Mark and I come from working class backgrounds. Both he and I are the first in our respective families to go to college. And the reality is the vast majority of Americans do not have a college degree. I think that far more government policy should be geared toward them in mind. I very much regret the fact that in this election, Democrats fell further behind with working class voters, and not just working class white voters. An increasing number of Latino, Asian, and African American working class voters voted Republican, even though I genuinely believe Republican economic policy in no way benefits them whatsoever. So this is a challenge that we as Democrats have to solve, and we need to meet it head on, because in the end of the day, I do believe it is our policies that are in the best interest of working class families in this country.
Congressman Brendan Boyle, thank you so much for your time. Well, they refused to certify the 2020 election results after January 6th, and now most of those lawmakers are poised to return to office. We'll explain what it means for Congress and their constituents. You're watching America Decides. More than 100 House Republicans who denied the results of the 2020 presidential election ran for re-election in 2024. Of those who objected to certify the election results, only 2 are projected to have lost this cycle. That's Mike Garcia of California and Yvette Herrell in New Mexico, who's actually lost in 2022 and was trying to win her seat back. CBS News political reporter Hunter Woodall joins us now. Hunter, what does this tell you about where the Republican Party stands and perhaps about the power of Donald Trump?
Well, what's so notable about this, as I crunched the numbers and went through, I was on Capitol Hill last week talking to Republicans. We knew this was Donald Trump's party. And what this data shows is, in one of the darkest moments of Donald Trump's, first term in office, these Republicans continue to support him. And I think when you look at what Republicans could do in Washington with this unified control that they're going to have in a second Trump administration, this just speaks to, there are a lot of people in Washington, in Congress, who are coming back. They supported Trump before, and they're likely to support him again in many of the, big moments to come in this presidency.
And what about the 2020 election deniers on the Senate side? How did they fare?
I'm so glad you asked about that, because I was going through that data just a few minutes ago, and, there were 3 main senators that we tracked here: Ted Cruz of Texas, Josh Hawley of Missouri, and Rick Scott of Florida. They all easily won their contest. And in the Senate, there were very few senators who actually objected to certifying election results. They all easily won these races. And, Florida and Texas were expected to be more competitive races. So what does that tell you? Republican voters, in Republican states continue to back these lawmakers.
So what's the right question here? Is it that, these lawmakers' support of Trump is the only thing that constituents care about, or is it more that they don't care about election denialism.
This is also wedded together. I mean, in 2022, we saw election deniers struggle in midterm contests. But in some of these places, these reliably Republican places, supporting Trump about election denialism was a key factor. It was a big test for, Republican primary voters. Did you back the, then former president in these moments? Yes, then we're going to sign off on you. But still, Republicans who objected to results actually faced primaries in some cases from the right. So this is still a big issue in the Republican Party.
Well, there's no doubt it is Trump's Republican Party right now. Thank you so much, Hunter Woodall. Global leaders discussed humanitarian crisis and ongoing wars at President Biden's last G20 summit. We'll have his message for them ahead of the White House transition. You're watching America Decides. On the first day of the annual G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro, President Biden reaffirmed U.S. support for the people of Israel and Ukraine.
The United States strongly supports Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Everyone around this table, in my view, should as well. And by the way, Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine led to the highest record food prices in all of history. In Gaza, as I've said before, Israel has the right to defend itself after the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. But how it defends itself, even as Hamas cruelty hides among civilians, matters a great deal.
CBS News chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes joins us now. Nancy, great to see you. Well, we just heard Biden put the war in Ukraine at the center of his G20 agenda, and that comes just as he announced a new policy allowing those long-range missiles into Russia. I wonder how much this big push has to do with Trump winning a second term and Biden's own time running out to support Ukraine.
I think it has a lot to do with it, Ouija. I mean, the president has been making a clear push in Brazil for not only the world, but also sending a message back to the incoming administration here at home about the importance of continuing to support Ukraine. His administration says that the reason, for example, that they are providing these long-range missiles, the ATACMS, to the Ukrainians now, when the Ukrainians have been asking for them for months, is because of the presence of North Korean troops fighting side by side with Russian troops now on the battlefield. But it is no accident that this is happening just as Joe Biden is standing there on the world stage with other G20 leaders, including the foreign minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov. He's certainly attempting to signal that, yes, the U.S. policy may change when Donald Trump is president, but that it is still important for U.S. allies to pick up the mantle here and perhaps lead the charge to continue supporting Ukraine and providing military aid.
Well, the president also met face-to-face with China's President Xi Jinping over the weekend. Did anything significant come out of that?
I think the most significant thing that came out of that meeting, a rare meeting between President Biden and Xi Jinping, had to do with AI and the use of AI to direct nuclear weapons. The two leaders agreed that nuclear weapons should always be handled by, directed by humans rather than AI. And that may sound kind of far-fetched and esoteric, but these kinds of weapons are being developed by advanced nations. And essentially what President Biden and President Xi said was that nuclear weapons are just much too dangerous, much too deadly, ever to be handled by or directed by even sophisticated AI when you're making these really important and very deadly decisions. Beyond that, they both kind of came there with messages that they wanted to deliver to the other, but I think it would have been difficult for them to make any other major long-lasting agreements when the reality is that Joe Biden is going to be leaving in a couple of months and a new president is coming in who has a very different approach to China.
That is very true. Thank you so much, Nancy Cordes. Well, President-elect Donald Trump told Fox News today he believes it is, quote, vital to have a free, fair, and open media or press, and that he is not looking for retribution on his opponents. Our political panel joins me now. Kevin Sheridan formerly served as a spokesperson for the Republican National Committee and as a senior advisor for the Romney-Ryan 2012 presidential campaign. Joel Payne is a CBS News political contributor and the chief communications officer for progressive public policy advocacy group Move On. It is great to see both of you. Thank you. Kevin, I want to start with something that the president-elect said at CPAC back in March 2023.
And we're not a free nation right now. We don't have free press. We don't have free anything. I am your warrior. I am your justice. And for those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution. I am your retribution.
So, Kevin, the one thing that has changed between then and now is that he won. But I wonder, other than that, how do we make sense of this?
Elon Musk bought Twitter, saving free speech, many would argue. Many Republicans would say that. Yeah, I think he's on top of the world right now, so I don't see him going hammer and tongs, against his media opponents. I mean, he just met with Joe and Mika at Mar-a-Lago, so I think there's a lot to do about nothing with that. I think he likes being liked in the media, so I think he will continue to court the media. How the media treats him going forward is a big unknown, but
he has said that if it is unfair, that it will come to an end, it being, his support of the press that we heard today. Joel, you just heard what Kevin said. Joe and Mika of Morning Joe went down to Florida to talk to President-elect Trump. Do you think that this is a reset of the relationship between Trump and the press?
Well, Weijia, I couldn't tell if Kevin was being funny about Elon Musk there. Nobody feels like Twitter is a free and fair platform, but be that as it may, listen, if I were an incoming president, I'd be looking to build coalition and to bring people together. So if that's what Donald Trump is doing, I don't think any American, even the millions and tens of millions of Americans who voted against him, would be opposed to that. I think we got to get down to brass tacks of what that means. Does that mean that he is going to back off of all of the things he's threatened related to our democratic norms? Does that mean he's going to stop attacking folks like you, Weijia, who go to his events and putting the spotlight on journalists who are just trying to do their jobs? Does that mean he's going to back off any folks in his cabinet from seeking political retribution? So, listen, I've spent a long time winning and losing battles against Donald Trump. And at this moment, I am more interested in seeing what he does than what he says.
Well, no matter what he does or says these days, Kevin, Elon Musk seems to be by his side. He's even, hanging out with the family. He's everywhere that Trump is. What does that tell you about the role that he is playing as Trump makes big decisions, including picking his cabinet?
apparently Elon Musk dives into each of his companies one at a time and focuses intensely for a period of time on that. I think that's what he's doing right now with his government, quasi-government work and reforming the federal workforce. But I don't know how long that lasts. He runs 6 companies and has a lot of things going on. So right now he's very influential, it seems, but we'll just have to see how long that actually lasts.
Well, it's a two-way street, right, Joel? Because, I mean, Trump has to allow him to be by his side. Just yesterday, Trump tapped Elon Musk-backed critic of big tech, Brendan Carr, to lead the FCC. So what do you make of this Trump-Musk relationship? I almost said bromance, and then I didn't, but then I said it anyway. So what do you make of it?
I'm going to let you characterize it however you want to. I think that it will be very interesting to see what the expiration date is on this relationship. It certainly was electorally helpful for Donald Trump with the millions of dollars that Elon Musk pumped into his campaign, into the effort to elect him, over the last few months of the campaign season. I'm sure he is grateful for that. But one thing we know about Donald Trump is that loyalty is a one-way street. So we'll see if that lasts beyond, the first 100 days. If Donald Trump is serious about, following through on his promises to the American people, I can tell you the folks who think and vote like me are going to be looking at some of the relationships that he's building with kind of these corporate oligarchs, folks like Elon Musk. You can't claim to be fighting for an economy for the working class, for working people, and then spend all of your time giving tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires. I mean, that tax bill that they're already talking about in Trump transition is going to be built on the back of poor and working class people. They're looking at stripping away benefits from Medicaid to pay for it. So that's not going to age well, right? If you are talking about representing that swath of the electorate, but you are empowering people like Elon Musk, that is not going to be something that ages well with the American people.
Joel, you can't see him, but Kevin is sitting here shaking his head. So Kevin.
No tax on tips, overtime. No tax on overtime. I don't see how that's not for the working class. Extending the Trump tax cut the biggest portion of it actually goes to the middle class. So I don't buy any of that. But yeah, look, Elon's going to be at his side for as long as he's going to be at his side.
Really quickly before I let you go, what do you make of Trump's picking RFK Jr. for HHS secretary? Of course, it's just one name that we're talking a lot about because it's a little controversial. Do you think this is another example of, loyalty being everything to Trump?
Well, RFK Jr. coming out for him arguably provided a lot of help, and he owes him. So he's following through, I think, on that pledge that he made to make him part of his cabinet. We'll see if he can get through. I actually think it's going to be really incredible TV to watch RFK go up there and be grilled by senators on vaccines. He's very smart, very, very on top of his game. So it'll get interesting.
Yes, these picks could make Senate confirmation hearings must-see TV, which who would have thought? Kevin Sheridan and Joel Payne, thank you both so much.
Thanks.
Well, Democrats lost Latino men in droves to Donald Trump. We'll break down what the president-elect did to win them over and how Democrats plan on turning that around. You're streaming America Decides.
We need to go back to the basics of what we are, a pro-worker, pro-family, party that is aspirational and pushing the American dream.
That was Senator-elect Ruben Gallego with some advice for fellow Democrats about winning back Latino voters. CBS News exit polling showed Vice President Harris lost men in that group to Donald Trump by 12 points. Adrian Carrasquillo and Sabrina Rodriguez joins us now. Adrian is a national political reporter, and Sabrina is a national politics reporter at The Washington Post. Thank you both for making time for us today. Sabrina, I want to start with you because you wrote about what we just heard from Gallego and his advice for the Democratic Party. You wrote about it for The Washington Post. What else did he say that the party has to do?
I mean, I think the number one thing that we heard from Gallego, he's been, talking about it while he was campaigning, and now I think he really has a case to make, having been successful and now being the senator-elect. Gallego really focused on talking about the economy with Latinos. He, looking at Latino men in particular, he was saying, the reality is that for a lot of Latino men, they've kind of grown up with this idea that they need to provide and protect for their family. And that's why the issues of the economy and immigration were so important for Latino men specifically. And part of what he was saying was, it's not that it's out of step with what Democratic policies were, what Democrats were proposing, what Harris was proposing, but it just needs to be talked about more. It really needs to be honed in on this is how Democrats are going to make your life better. This is Democrats really hearing you and really wanting to be there for you. And that's something he thinks Democrats have, lost a little bit of momentum on.
And Adrian, on the other side of that, what did President-elect Trump's campaign do right to win over so many Latino men?
I've been thinking about this. When you think about his Univision town hall, he did his sort of, his usual meat and potatoes. I'm going to bring jobs. Latinos care about jobs. But he said, Hispanics have attracted to me and I've attracted to them. And it just is a reminder that, he didn't care that the Republican National Committee shut down their Hispanic community centers earlier this year. It's not, to him, what's important is not, do Latinos have a relationship with Republicans? They want him to have a relationship with him. He wants them to like him, to love him, to believe what he says on the economy. And I think that's where he had that strength.
Sabrina, are Democrats at the national level listening to figures like Gallego and planning a course adjustment?
I mean, I think there's a lot of alarm right now because of the numbers, and there's a lot of finger pointing going around, a lot of the blame game. I think that transcends, of course, Latino voters. I mean, we see Democrats sort of reeling from this loss. But when it comes to Latinos in specific and Latino men's, I mean, the figures speak for themselves. Now, a lot of Democrats are pointing to Gallego. I mean, on Latino men, Gallego outpaced Harris by 9 points in exit polls in Arizona. So there is the data to back up that he ran a successful campaign, that what he is doing is resonating with Latino men. And a lot of people are saying, you know, we can have a blueprint here. It's not just that, oh, Ruben Gallego is a Latino man, therefore he won Latino voters. It's, oh, Ruben Gallego ran a successful campaign where he really targeted these voters and really courted them, and we should be doing the same.
And it's not just the economy, obviously. The border is also a huge issue. And Adrian, I want to ask you about Trump's post on social media today. He reiterated that he plans to declare a national emergency over immigration and use the military to deport undocumented immigrants. We know that the majority of Americans agree with mass deportations. What about this particular voting bloc? Do they support this policy?
You know, I think it's important to realize the reason that Trump was confirming that today is because the first time we heard about this was in November 2023 from Stephen Miller. They said what they were going to do. When they say, you should believe them. I think the other piece of this is you know, the media covering what the impact of these policies are. CBS News had an incredible story right before the election where they talked about it would be $20 billion for every million people that you're going to deport. So it starts to become, what does this policy actually look like when we do it? What does it become when Republicans like Maria Elvira Salazar are saying, oh, don't worry, they're only going to deport criminals? Well, that's actually not what Trump and Stephen Miller have been saying this entire time. So, and then what does it look like on the humanitarian side? When you had during the Obama presidency and during Trump's first presidency, people were very upset with what was going on in these facilities, and now they're going to be even more sprawling and have even more people in them. So that's going to be something really important to watch during his term.
Sabrina, we're also, of course, closely watching all of his nominations for a potential Trump cabinet, and you've reported that his win was fueled by a total realignment of the electorate. Are you seeing that reflected in the names that he's announcing?
I mean, right now it seems that Donald Trump's picks are really to appease his base of voters. I think, you know, the picks, for as much attention has been put on them and sort of the scandalous nature of some of his picks so far, it really is targeting his base voter. I think for some of those, you know, Latino voters and others that were not traditionally part of the Republican electorate, I think as the months pass and the early days of the administration come in, it's going to be interesting to see sort of how they feel about the execution of the policies. Like Adrian was saying, you know, I think some of it is wrapped up in misconceptions and a belief that Trump is not necessarily going to do everything that he promised he would do, everything that he campaigned on. So right now, these picks really reflect the things that he was promising in his rallies, that he was, talking about for months. But it's going to be an open question how those folks that he has brought into the tent, the Republican tent, how they are going to feel once they see the policies that these people are putting in place.
And we are waiting for so many more names. Thank you both so much, Sabrina Rodriguez and Adrian Carrasquillo. Really appreciate your sharing your reporting with us. Well, you know that Donald Trump wants Matt Gaetz to lead it, but what else should we know about Trump's plans for the Department of Justice? We'll dig into that next. You're watching America Decides.
It's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me.
That was President-elect Donald Trump accusing Democrats of using the U.S. Justice Department to indict him for a number of crimes, an accusation he made repeatedly while on the campaign trail. So what exactly does this baseless claim signal about how the president-elect will seek to reshape the DOJ? Hugo Lowell may have the answer for us. He is a senior political correspondent for The Guardian. Hugo, thanks for being here. So let's start right there, because President-elect Trump has made very clear that he has a new vision for the DOJ. What does that look like?
It's going to be structural change. How you think the DOJ has operated in the past is not going to be the way that it's going to operate in a second Trump admin. You're going to see entire components of DOJ replaced, fired, changed into people that he trusts and he thinks can carry out what he wants to do, right? And there's two prongs here. One is doing the sorts of political investigations, the retribution sort of thing he was talking about on the campaign trail. That will probably come to pass through his handpicked team. I mean, right now, leading DOJ, or on the names list, lead DOJ, Todd Blanche as personal attorney, Emil Beauvais as the PAIDAG. That's the principal deputy in the Deputy Attorney General's office who runs the department day to day. These are his personal lawyers, and they're loyal to him. They will do what he wants. And I think, that's not even to mention Matt Gaetz as the Attorney General who will lead the department if he is confirmed. But second of all, they also want a clear shot because I think they see a lot of line attorneys who they see as too institutional or too swampy, as Trump would say, and they want to install people who will actually carry out the agenda. If you have institutional line attorneys, prosecuting attorneys, for instance, in the criminal division or the national security division, and they think, we actually don't think X investigation is adhering to the facts and the law, they might not carry it out. To accomplish their ends, Trump has to fire all these people, get rid of these people in various respects. And so I think you're going to see a fundamental realignment of how DOJ operates.
There is a lot to unpack there, and I'm glad you brought all of it up. But I do want to go back to the former Congressman Matt Gaetz being tapped to head this effort. Take me inside Trump world. Do they think he's going to be confirmed, or is there a concern that he may not be?
I think the consensus right now is let's wait and see. I think on balance, they think he probably will make it. There's, 4 kind of controversial candidates for various jobs, whether it's RFK Jr., whether it's Matt Gaetz, whether it's Tulsi Gabbard, whether it's Pete Hegseth for the SecDef job. But they think Matt Gaetz probably is the easiest to get over the finish line, and that's for a number of reasons. Number one, they think the sexual kind of harassment claims and the stuff that has permeated through the House of Representatives when he was serving as a member has been around for a long time. They think this is nothing new. They can convince people to get over it. And their principal argument against that is to say, look, Matt Gaetz was investigated by the Department of Justice and no charges were brought. It went through a whole grand jury process. They want to argue to individual senators as they kind of build support leading to confirmation hearings that not only has all of this previously come out, but the witnesses are tainted. That was why DOJ didn't prosecute it. That's the argument they're going to make. So I think they see a path forward for Matt Gaetz in a way that maybe some of the other candidates might not, because they have an argument they can come back to saying he was investigated but not charged.
Well, that path will certainly be dramatic and rocky for Gaetz, but you're right. Who knows if he could clear it? So before we let you go, I want to ask you about the other names that you're anticipating hearing. Obviously, Trump has been very strategic in his announcements, both in the substance and the order of who he's announcing. So what are you looking out for?
Look, there are a number of roles that Trump really cares about. That's the Attorney General, that's FBI Director, CIA Director, and that's basically it. I mean, the rest of the positions, yeah, he focuses on, but those are his main picks. We've already got an Attorney General pick. We've already got a CIA Director pick. So FBI Director, that's going to be the big one. The kinds of names that are being floated there by the Trump kind of OG, the real MAGA crowd from 2016, it's Kash Patel. And I think a lot of people were thinking about Kash and talking about Kash as a bit of a joke appointment or, a bit of a name that was just being thrown around. It's becoming more and more solid in recent days. And I think that is also because the team that is pushing, or the factions that are pushing Kash Patel, have so far been successful in getting other people into big posts. For instance, like Todd Blanchard, Emil Beauvais, and Matt Gaetz, it's all the same faction in Trump world. It's the team that was with Trump in 2016. And so I think they're emboldened to think, well, if we could get our DOJ picks in, we might just be able to get Kash Patel in as FBI Director, and if not the Director, maybe the Deputy Director. And if that happens, the FBI will be effectively run out of the West Wing. The idea that DOJ and FBI were completely independent, that will cease to exist.
Well, we will see how that ages the next time we have you on. Thank you so much, Hugo. Well, that does it for today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report starts right now.